Hey, sixth grade, happy Tuesday. I hope everyone's having a great day so far. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. For today, we are working on Module 5, Lesson 11. You're going to be copying down the examples that Ms. Drexler posted on Google Classroom, and those examples can be found on page 139 and 140. Today, I'm going to be going over the examples on 139 and 140 for you, just for some extra clarification. But before I start, I do want to remind you that we have a Google Meet session today from 2:30 to 3 o'clock. So come on with any questions that you have. If you're confused with any of the content or anything like that, come on with any questions. Ms. Drexler and I will be on there to answer any questions that you have. Or if you don't have any questions and you just want to come on and talk to some of your friends or talk to Ms. Drexler and myself, that is totally fine too. We're very excited to see you all. And yeah, so I'm going to get started with this right now. So I am on page 139 of your books. I had to write this down on a piece of paper. I was going to do it on my whiteboard, but it was kind of weird with the camera and you couldn't really see it. And I didn't want you to strain your eyes looking at it. So a piece of paper is what we have for right now. So bear with me. I know it's kind of weird, a weird way to learn, but it's new for me too. So I am on page 139 and I'm going to be doing the opening exercise. So the opening exercise on page 139 says, which prism holds more 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch cubes? And then it says, how many more cubes does the prism hold? So I drew them out, and we all know that I'm not good at drawing, so don't judge, but here are the two prisms that I drew out. So this is the first one that you see, and this is the other one. So it's asking, how many more cubes does the prism hold? So what we have to do here is we have to find the volume. And in order to find the volume, we're going to use our formula, V equals length times width times height. So for our opening exercise, again, I'm on page 139. Here's what I did. I drew this out. Yours is obviously drawn for you, but we have our length, which is 10, our width, which is 4, and our height, which is 6. So I wrote down my formula. I said V equals length times width times height. And all I did was I just plugged in those numbers. So I did V equals 10 times 4 times 6. And when you multiply those three numbers together, and remember our label on that was inches, when you multiply those three numbers together, you're going to get 240 inches cubed. So now we need to find the volume for the other one. I have a length of 8, I have a width of 5, and I have a height of 12 right here. So I wrote down my formula, V equals length times width times height. Again, my label is inches, as you can see right here. I didn't put the label right here, but I did end with one. Super important to label. So I had V equals 8 times 5 times 12. And when you multiply those three numbers together, you get 480 inches cubed. Now it's asking how many more cubes does the prism hold? So I have 240 as an answer and then 480. What I did is I took these two numbers, I subtracted them, and I got 240 inches cubed, and then I put more cubes as my label because there are 240 more cubes, and obviously I put my label of inches cubed. I had to kind of squeeze it in there. So that is how I did my opening exercise. Now, still on page 139, moving down to example 1. Example 1 said a box with the same dimension as a prism in the opening exercise. So this picture that we had right here, this is the exact same picture that we're working with in example 1. So it says a box with the same dimension as the prism in the opening exercise is used to ship miniature dice whose side lengths have been cut in half. The dice are a 1/2 inch times a 1/2 inch times a 1/2 inch cubes. So it's saying how many dice of this size can fit into the box. So it's asking me how many dice that are a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch can fit into the box. So on your paper, you'll see that you have your box. I drew mine again. This is the same one as the opening exercise. So here's the work that I did. I did in 1/2 inch times a 1/2 inch times a half inch, and I got 1/8. So with multiplication, I multiplied my numerators, I multiplied my denominators, and I got 1/8. So for this, I then took my 1/8 and I said, okay, I flipped it to make it into 8 whole. And I said, okay, I have 8 half-inch cubes in a 1-inch cube. Sorry, that was a tongue twister. So I have 8 half-inch cubes in a 1-inch cube. So that's my label for this part right here. Now, I knew that from my work up here that the volume of this prism was 240. So that's where I got this from. We did the work right here to find the volume of this prism. So I took the work that I did up here and I just brought it right back down there. So I said, okay, I know that my volume for this prism is 240 inches cubed. So I took my 240 and I multiplied it by 8. And when I multiplied those two numbers together, I got 1,920 half-inch cubes. So that was your answer for example 1 and the opening exercise for that one. And that was on page 139. Now I'm going to move on to page 140. So for page 140, you had to copy down example 2, and then you were to copy down exercise 1, A through D. So we're going to go over those right now. For the first one, for example 2, it says that a 1/4 inch cube was used to fill the prism. So that's the information that it gives us. And now it's asking us to find how many 1/4 inch cubes does it take to fill the prism. So that's the first question that we need to figure out. And then it wants us to find what the volume of the prism is. It asks, what is the volume of the prism? And then the last one says, how is the number of cubes related to the volume? So you could go about doing this problem in 2 ways. There's 2 different methods to do this. I did both, so I'll show you both method 1 and method 2. I suggest to use the method that you think works best for you and that you understand the most. So I would definitely try to pick a method, either 1 or 2, and say, okay, this one works well for me, okay, this one doesn't, and figure it out from there. So for method 1, we have our prism right here. There's our prism. And I did the volume formula. So I have V equals length times width times height. And what I did is that it told me that it was 1/4 inches right here. So what I said to myself, just to kind of make the math a little bit easier for myself, is I said, okay, I have 1/4 inches. How many times do I have to multiply 1/4 to get 1 1/2 inches? And once you do that math, you'll figure out that you have to do it 6 times. And then I did the same thing for right here. So this, our width right here, is 1 inch. I know that I'm working with 1/4 inches. And I said, okay, how many times do I need to multiply 1/4 to get 1 whole inch? You need to do that 4 times. And then I did the same thing up here, and I got 15. So that's how I got those numbers. I know that can be a little bit confusing, but that's the way that I did it. So I put down my formula. I have V equals length times width times height. And then I plugged in that 6, that 4, and that 15. So I did 6 times 4 times 15. I got 360 1/4 inch cubes as my answer for that. So when it says how many 1/4, this question right here, how many 1/4 inch cubes does it take to fill the prism? Your answer is going to be 360 for that one. So that's how method 1 was done. Here's method 2. I like method 2 better. It makes more sense to me, but everybody is different, and that's totally fine. There might be people who think method 1 makes more sense. To me, method 2 makes more sense, and that's fine if you're the complete opposite, or yeah. So for method 2, here's what I did. I'm using the same formula because we're trying to find volume. So I did volume equals length times width times height. What I did is I took these original fractions. So I had my length was 1 1/2 inches, my width was 1 inch, and my height was 3 3/4 inches. And I took those 3 numbers and I plugged them in to my formula. So I did 1 1/2 times 1 times 3 3/4. And what I did is I took these mixed numbers and I changed them into an improper fraction. And if you need a refresher on this, how you do that is you take your denominator, which was 2, and your whole number, which is 1, and you're going to multiply those together. So 2 times 1 is 2, and then you're going to add it to your numerator. So 2 times 2, or I'm sorry, 2 times 1 is 2, and then you're going to take that answer and you're going to add it to your numerator. So 2 plus 1 is 3, and like always, you keep your denominator. Your denominator will stay the same, so you should get 3 over 2. 1 in fraction form would just be 1 over 1. And then 3 3/4 as an improper fraction would be 15/4. And again, I just took my 4 times 3, I got 12, and I added 12 to 3, which was my numerator, and I got 15/4. So once you get that with multiplication, remember that you don't need common denominators. That's the really cool part about multiplication, is that you don't need common denominators when you're working with fractions. So I did 3 times 1 times 15, I got 45, and then I multiplied my denominators together, 2 times 1 times 4, and that gave me 8. So I have 45/8, and then my label for that was inches cubed, and that was my answer for what is the volume of the prism. I have 45/8 inches cubed. So that's how I did that one. Now, since it said that each of these was 1/4, I'm taking my 1/4, I'm multiplying it 3 times, so 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4. I took all my numerators, I multiplied them together, I got 1. All my denominators, multiplied them together, I got 64. And so my answer was I have 64 1/4 inch cubes in a 1 inch cube right there. And then what I did is that I took this volume that I found right here, so 45/8, and I just multiplied it by 64 and I put it over 1. And then you're just going to multiply across. So you do 45 times 64, which is 2,880, and then 8 times 1 is 8. And if you were to divide these two numbers, you would get 360 1/4 inch cubes. So your answer here is the same answer as you got here. So those are the two methods on how to do example 2. Again, you don't, just because I like method 2 doesn't mean that you have to. If method 1 works for you, if that makes sense for you, go for it, use it, use whatever works best for you. Everybody's different. So that was example 2 on page 140. Now I'm going to go over exercise 1, A through D. So exercise 1 says to use the prism to answer the following questions. And the first one, A, is asking me to calculate the volume. So here's what I have. I have my prism. I labeled it. As you all know, I love to label and underline everything. It just helps me stay organized. So I put an L down here for length, W for width, and an H for height, just to keep my thoughts organized. And what I did here was I used my volume formula. So I have V equals length times width times height. And I plugged in these 3 numbers into my formula. So my length was 5 1/3. My width was 2/3. And my height was 1 1/3. And I did the same thing that I did down here up here. So I have my mixed number and I'm turning it into an improper fraction. So 5 1/3 as an improper fraction would be 16/3. 2/3 would just stay the same. And then 1 1/3 as a mixed number, 1 1/3 as an improper fraction is 4/3. Okay, so there's that. And then I took my numerators, I multiplied them all together. I took my denominators and I multiplied them all together, and I got 128/27 centimeters cubed. I didn't put the label of centimeters right here, but I knew to do it because this was labeled centimeters. Do not forget to label, super important to label your answers. So that was how you calculated the volume right there. And then it said you have to fill the prism with cubes whose side lengths are less than 1 centimeter. Which size would be best? I said that 1/3 centimeter would be best. And now for C, it says how many of the cubes would fit into the prism. So what I did is I just took my numerators right here, my 16, my 2, and my 4, and I multiplied them together. So I have 16 times 2 times 4, and that gave me 128 1/3 centimeter cubes as my answer. So that's how I did that one. And then for D, my last one, it said use the relationship between the number of cubes and the volume to prove that your volume calculation is correct. So this is basically us just checking our work here. So what I did is I took 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3, and I got 1/27. And this is kind of a visual for you. This is how I got the 1/3, 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to take the volume of my prism and I'm going to divide it by the volume of my 1/3 centimeter right there. So I knew that my volume of my prism from my answer right here, this is the volume of the prism. This is where I got my number from. I did 128/27. Again, I got that from right up here. And then I divided it by 1/27. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this into multiplication and I'm going to flip it. So I'm going to put my 27 on top and my 1 on the bottom, so that way these two can cancel out. So I have my 128/27 times 27/1. As you can see, I have two 27s. They're across from each other right here. You can go ahead and you can just cross those right out, and those will cancel out. So now you have a super easy multiplication problem to do. All you do is you're going to carry your 128 over, carry your 1 over, and then if you were to do 128 divided by 1, you would just get 128 1/3 centimeters as your answer. And that is what we did for page 140. I hope that me explaining this helped you understand it a little if you were confused at all. Don't forget, I know I've said this, but we do have our Google Meet session from 2:30 to 3. Miss Drexler and I will be on there. So we're looking forward to seeing all of you. If you have any questions about any of the content, please write them down or just have something with you so you can ask us questions. If you just want to interact with your friends on the Google Meet and just see everyone and catch up and see how everyone's doing, that's totally fine too. We're really excited to see all of your faces and talk to all of you. For your independent work or homework tonight, whatever you want to call it, you're going to complete the exit ticket for lesson 11, which is what we did today. We did module 5, lesson 11. You're going to complete the exit ticket. That's going to be on page 143. And then you're just going to post the answer that you got, so the volume from the lesson 11 exit ticket, and a private comment on the assignment in Google Classroom. So don't forget to do that. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I will see you all tomorrow.